Boots on the ground. Will US military support for Taiwan widen the rift between the world's two biggest superpowers? A friend from down under. Former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott calls for more international support for Taiwan. Status changed. The conflict between the social media giant and an individual's right to privacy. And science gets some divine intervention to fight climate change. Welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Tensions remain high across the Taiwan Strait in the days after China sent an unprecedented number of military planes into Taiwan's air defense zone. And new reports that US troops have been in Taiwan training the country's armed forces could complicate attempts to defuse the situation. Rick Glowett has this report.
Taiwan, a country claimed by neighbouring China. Its very existence is a major sticking point in what has been called Cold War 2.0 between superpowers, the United States and China. The latest controversy? Reports from the Wall Street Journal that 24 US Marines and Special Operations Forces have been deployed in Taiwan for more than a year. US boots on the ground are seen as a red line for the Chinese Communist Party, which claims Taiwan as its sovereign territory despite never having ruled it.
China feels necessary to react to the United States and allied forces when they conduct exercises in the area that China considers their spheres of influence.
This latest news follows a record number of incursions into Taiwan's air defense zone, 150 military planes in just the first 5 days of October. More aggression is likely to put more strain on China's relationship with the US, Taiwan's greatest ally. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and top Chinese diplomat Yang Jiechi met this week. Sullivan said the US is concerned by China's destabilizing actions in the region. The talks and the chance of warming ties have been welcomed in Chinese media, but there is still mixed feelings towards the US on the streets of Beijing.
那我肯定希望啊，中国和美国的关系，如果说要是会谈会往好的方向发展的话，对下边的老百姓也会有帮助啊。
但是呢，就是说能不能达成怎么样的这个协议啊，还是没有什么信心，因为美国对我们中国的这个就是怎么叫崛起啊，本身他就怀着一种敌视的态度，所以很难解决的。我觉得我是这么想。
President Biden has called for more diplomacy and less of a Cold War attitude. But actions speak louder than words. Reports the CIA is planning a new China mission center have underlined the lack of trust on both sides.
It is impossible to divide the world in the same sort of blocks as 50, 60 years ago. However, there are indeed some similarities, and the Cold War narrative seems to be one of them. It's basically the attitude, if you're not with us, you're against us. And it has to be stressed that both Chinese government and government in Washington seem to be in a way following that kind of attitude, following that kind of strategy.
The 10 days between China's National Day and Taiwan's National Day are politically sensitive. And this weekend, leaders in both Beijing and Taipei are expected to speak on the cross-strait impasse. What has become clear this week is that when Beijing sends its planes to Taiwan, it doesn't just rattle the country's military, it rattles the whole geopolitical order. Damon Lin and Rick Glowett for TaiwanPlus.
I spoke with Maggie Lewis, a legal scholar at Academia Sinica in Taipei, and asked her how Taiwan has found itself caught in the center of the China-US rivalry.
The U.S.-China relationship has a number of stressful points right now, and so I don't want it to be that Taiwan is the only place. We just saw the big speech on trade. Those are ongoing tensions there. Other concerns about what's happening with respect to Beijing's ambitions beyond its borders, not just Taiwan. But I think that there's been a lot of simmering concern about what it means to have the Biden administration continuing the Trump administration's strong support for Taiwan, which I think is fantastic, but testing how that's going to play out and what concrete changes might come, not just from the Biden administration, but of course from Congress, because that's also in the mix here as an expression of U.S. support for Taiwan. And we have to emphasize we're in this very sensitive time between the PRC National Day on October 1st and Double 10 Day in Taiwan. And so that too is going to make everything have a little bit more, I think, theatrics behind it than hopefully we're going to see after this period passes.
So the news today from the Wall Street Journal of US troops training for about a year in Taiwan. Should we be surprised at this?
This news is not entirely news. I mean, there were reports before about trainings occurring. And certainly, we don't just, the United States doesn't just send hardware. There's a lot of coordination, a lot of talks, and a lot of help that occurs. Some of it is more on the direct military side, but of course also the GCTF, the Global Cooperation Training Framework. So I don't want to turn this into this, massive revelation, but it does reveal more that there is some really substantive work going on with the forces. And I think it also just brings to the fore how the Taiwan's efforts to have their overall defense strategy changing to this asymmetric warfare, it really does require a different kind of training than just sort of sending the big shiny objects, the big ticket items. And so I'm curious to see going forward to what extent we see more of this kind of collaboration and training.
President Tsai says Taiwan does not seek conflict, but will defend its freedom and democracy. Tsai was speaking at a security forum in Taipei, attended by the former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott and other representatives from 10 nations. Tsai reiterated her comments from earlier in the week after China sent a record number of airplanes into Taiwan's air defense identification zone. She said Taiwan will work with partners in the region to ensure stability.
Taiwan is fully committed to collaborating with regional players to prevent armed conflicts in the East China, South China Seas, and in the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan does not seek military confrontation. It hopes for a peaceful, stable, predictable, and mutually beneficial coexistence with its neighbors. But Taiwan will also do whatever it takes to defend its freedom and democratic way of life.
It was a sharply worded statement against China's practices and a push for more support for Taiwan. The former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott gave the keynote address at Taiwan's annual Yushan Forum on Friday, which promotes regional ties. TaiwanPlus reporter William Yen has more.
Walking on stage to deliver the keynote address at Taiwan's annual Yushan Forum is former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott. Abbott's visit comes after China sent 150 warplanes into Taiwan's air defense zone over the past week. Abbott was direct in his criticisms of China under the CCP. He also expressed staunch support for Taiwan.
Since then, as you know, Beijing has torn up the One Country, Two Systems Treaty on Hong Kong. It's put upwards of 1 million Uyghurs into concentration camps. It's boosted cyber spying on its own citizens, cancelled popular personalities in favour of a cult of the Red Emperor, brutalised Indian soldiers in the Himalayas, coerced other claimants in its eastern seas, and flown ever more intimidatory sorties against Taiwan. It's weaponised trade, especially against Australia, with our barley, wine and coal exports all stopped on spurious grounds. And its embassy has published 14 demands, essentially that we become a tributary state that no self-respecting country could accept.
While Abbott was fiercely critical of China, he was quick to remind the world of the country's positive history. According to Abbott, China's economic miracle has lifted 500 million people out of poverty in just a generation. However, he used the opportunity to remind Beijing of the importance of freedom and adhering to the rules-based global order. Now in its fifth year, the Yusan Forum seeks to strengthen Taiwan's relationship with ASEAN member states, India, Australia and New Zealand. Abbott also reiterated the importance of Taiwan's accession to the CPTPP, repeating what he said to President Tsai during a visit to the presidential office on Thursday. He said it would send a strong message of democratic solidarity.
I can't think of a stronger signal of democracy standing shoulder to shoulder with Taiwan than Taiwan's accession to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I do hope that your application will be welcomed by its existing members.
Taiwan formally announced its application to join the CPTPP on September 22nd. It follows an application made by China just days before. The economies currently included in the CPTPP account for 13.3% of the world's GDP, worth a total of $10.6 trillion and covers a population of 499 million. Meanwhile, all eyes are on Abbott's trip. No serving Australian minister has officially visited Taiwan since Canberra recognized Beijing in the 1970s. James Rayner and William Yen for TaiwanPlus.
There's good news for citizens and some foreign residents in Taiwan today. Government-issued stimulus vouchers are ready to collect. It follows the largest domestic outbreak of COVID-19 the country has experienced to date. The stimulus vouchers, valued at 5,000 NT or $180, are available in physical and digital formats. Taiwanese citizens, their foreign or Chinese spouses, permanent residents and diplomats are all eligible for the handouts. Digital vouchers can be linked to credit cards, mobile payment services or stored values cards. But most people have still opted for physical vouchers. As of Thursday, more than 11.93 million people had signed up for the paper versions. According to the Finance Ministry, it seems that when it comes to money, paper is still king in Taiwan. How does a tropical island getaway sound? In the era of COVID-19, many people are looking forward to the day they can travel abroad on holiday once again. Now those fully vaccinated with Taiwan's domestic Medigen vaccine can travel to the Pacific island nation of Palau with no restrictions. Our reporter Sandy Chi has more.
One of the few countries to officially recognize Taiwan, Palau previously allowed only travelers fully vaccinated with a WHO-approved vaccine to enter the country. But yesterday, President Serangal Whips Jr. announced Medigen would also be added to the list. It means travelers who have received 2 shots of Taiwan's homegrown vaccine now have another potential holiday destination. Elsewhere on Thursday, Taiwan received a 6th shipment of BioNTech vaccine, with a further delivery +1 of the Moderna vaccine scheduled to arrive on Friday. The BioNTech shipment is part of 15 million doses ordered by Foxconn's Charitable Foundation, as well as TSMC and the Tsai Foundation. All of the vaccines are being donated to the government for distribution. With doses arriving at a steady pace, the government announced that it will continue expanding eligibility for the BioNTech vaccine to younger age groups. It is currently also available for all those aged 61 years or older. Aznaya Zhou and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break, after a week of controversy, we ask an expert if Facebook divides and destabilizes democracies. Stay with us.
今天台湾人要了解的是，我们跟这片土地关系里面，它是跟你的生命的根源息息相关。像这个红块、扁柏等等，他们都是台湾的神明。长期以来，我一直误以为我在抢救山林，直到最近10年来，我才了解，我从来没有抢救山林，而是山林从来在抢救我们。我们的地球46亿年来，我们就是它的一部分，它就是我们共同的灵魂，流传在我的血液中，也流动在树叶当中。
这是我们台湾人要送给台湾的礼物。
我们都清楚，我们都在一起，在完成一件事情。
这是我们的根。
Welcome back to TaiwanPlus News. A reminder of our top story. Tensions remain high across the Taiwan Strait. New reports say that US troops have been in Taiwan training the country's armed forces, and this could complicate attempts to defuse the situation. This week, the world's biggest social media platform was roiled by controversy. A former Facebook employee released internal documents purporting to show the harm done by the website to children and society at large. Whistleblower Francis Haugen says Facebook knew of the harmful effects of its services but chose to cover them up in pursuit of profit.
But I'm here today because I believe Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy. The company's leadership knows how to make Facebook and Instagram safer, but won't make the necessary changes because they have put their astronomical profits before people.
To find out more about the dangers posed by the social media, our reporter Reinhold Kilpatrick spoke to Professor Puma Shen of National Taipei University, who is the director of Doublethink Lab. He began by asking whether he agrees with Haugen that Facebook deepens divides and destabilizes democracies.
I think not just Facebook, but all social media platforms might destabilize democracy because they always need to choose profit over social justice. So I think the way to solve that issue is that we need transparency. All the data scientists or academics, scholars should have full access to all this data and see whether there's double standard for community standards. And I think that's number one. And number two is that since transparency is the key, I think an independent audit system should be established locally in each country. Because since if we want to appeal cases here in Taiwan and someone in China would review it, that would be kind of ridiculous. So if we have local audit system, then they can review all this appeal process independently. I think that will be that will stabilize instead of destabilize our democracy.
Many people around the world have called for increased government oversight of Facebook and other tech giants. But others argue this could open the door for more censorship. So how do we strike the right balance in order to protect our democracy and our freedoms?
Yeah, I think it would be, I think non-government or non-profit organizations should be participating instead of the government itself. So if the government are in this reviewing process, and that will definitely violate the freedom of speech. So to avoid that, that's what I said, we need an independent audit system locally in each country. And then people can choose who should fit this position.
Many people have also called for the breakup of Facebook, but the whistleblower has come out against this. Where do you stand on this question?
To break up monopoly might not be the only solution to this case, because like even there is no monopoly, still all these commercial social media platform, they'll always choose profit over social justice, and that things will still happen without monopoly. So that's why we should have the independent audit system.
Now, while there'll always be questions about the possible breach of an individual's rights when it comes to technology, in Taiwan, tracking and contact tracing has helped the island overcome its biggest outbreak in the pandemic. In the final segment of our Resilient Taiwan series, we look at how innovation has been one of the most effective weapons in the fight against the spread of COVID-19.
Taiwan is known as the technology island for its reputation as a high-tech hub and a microchip powerhouse. It's here that much of the world's most sophisticated and advanced semiconductors are designed and produced. Across the planet, devices from fridges to cars rely on Taiwan-made chips. And it's this high-tech advantage that helped the island combat its most serious COVID-19 outbreak when the pandemic finally caught up with Taiwan in May 2021. In the fight against the pandemic, Taiwan has a skilled warrior. The digital minister Audrey Tang is a top software programmer, hacker, and all-round tech guru. With coronavirus case numbers in single or double digits for most of the pandemic, Taiwan perfected contact tracing and quarantining. But when cases slipped through the net in May, the nation needed to raise its game. Tang called on telecom providers to work with the health ministry. They created a QR code check-in system that automatically sends a text message to the epidemic command center and registers a person's whereabouts. It would be essential for tracing and containing possible infections. But the timing was tight.
The government expected the system to be completed in just 3 days. We thought, how is it possible? Our team worked almost around the clock to get all the systems ready in 3 days. We were under intense pressure. There were several challenges. First, we had to roll it out quickly because the pandemic was serious and the environment was changing rapidly. Secondly, it had to be simple. Everyone would need to use the registering system quickly so that large queues did not form. Thirdly, it had to be rolled out across many locations.
This first-of-its-kind system quickly replaced paper and pen registration. It was easy to use, more reliable, and quickly adopted by the population. Equally important was testing. Frontline medical workers heeded the call to test people en masse, working long hours and putting themselves at personal risk of contracting the virus. But what if people could book, take a test, and receive the results, all without ever having to come into physical contact with doctors and nurses? Jerry Chen, a surgeon and tech entrepreneur, found a way. Chen developed his own nasal swab robot based on a previous machine that he designed to assist with brain surgery.
The most important goal is to protect medical staff and patients. The station combines a swab robot with an automatic pipette. We streamlined the entire process in the station in a container. It takes one person to complete all the tasks, so manpower can be greatly reduced, as well as the risk caused by the delivery process.
This was combined with an app for booking tests and receiving results. Taiwan was able to roll out a 100% contact-free coronavirus testing system to protect its frontline health workers.
Besides the original purpose of reducing the risk of infection, there are 2 benefits. The first is efficiency. The station reduces labor costs. The other is timeliness, which means reports can be generated quickly.
But as infections rose, patients and suspected cases needed to be transferred to hospitals and quarantine facilities. Taiwan's firefighters stepped up to the plate to ferry sick people. Donning layers of PPE to protect themselves and their patients during Taiwan's scorching summer made their job even tougher. To limit the use of individual PPE, Yang Guanwei used top-of-the-line laser cutting technology to retrofit ambulances with isolation chambers.
The first one took 3 to 4 days from design to completion. Only when I came to the second ambulance did I realise that the difference in size of the interior ranged from 5 to 10 centimetres. There was no way to use the same design. Each vehicle had to be customised.
The advanced technology made the firefighters' job much more comfortable and reduced turnaround time between calls.
Because the isolation chamber is completely airtight, it's safer. The disinfection is also simpler. We don't need to reattach protective tape every time. Just wiping alone is sufficient to clean and disinfect the chamber. It's awesome.
Pandemics, plagues, and disease are as old as time. They have long ravaged communities and changed societies beyond recognition. But in Taiwan, tech-savvy innovation and visionary leaders have shown that this age-old scourge requires a 21st century approach to be tamed.
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus News. We'll leave you with some images of a Russian paraclimber with 2 amputated legs who scaled the 8,600-metre mountain Masalu in Nepal. Stay safe and see you next time.